Thanks for that, Corinne. First, who loves the 80s? It's easy to forget how grim parts of the 80s were. Thatcherism, the Falklands, the terrible miners' strike, Greedy's Good, Rubik's Cubes.
A proper one. I could never do it.
Shut up.
I love them.
The 80s gave us the mullet hairdo, leg warmers, Dynasty, Dallas. We all looked cool with our Walkmans. Do you remember these? First generation. They played things called tapes, which for our younger viewers were made of plastic. They had some long metal strips inside them. And then, of course, there were first generation mobile phones, phones the size of houses with batteries and a separate case. You remember those ones, didn't you?
I had that.
You had one?
Oh, yeah.
That's probably a collector's item now.
Oh, I'm so proud of it. I used to drive... I remember driving up the King's Road. I got my phone, so I'm going to take it out of the car. Now, that took about 5 minutes. I had to get the battery out the boot and then carry this thing like a brick and put it down in the shop and make a phone call.
And then the battery went dead, didn't it? That's
After
the thing.
5 minutes.
Yeah, 5
Yeah,
minutes.
it's a waste
Those
of
are the
time.
days. And yet, when I think back, I have nothing but fond memories. Helped, I think, by the wonderful music and the fabulous fashions of the time. New wave gave way to new romantics. Boys looked like girls. Girls looked, well, frankly, like rubbish. And, and then we refused to let go of the 80s as well. Transformers are now in the cinema. Slogan T-shirts back on the catwalk. Pools on the road. Bananarama, ABC, Rick Astley. Thatcher back in Downing Street, for heaven's sake. How did that happen? Whisper bars back in the shops. And the Rubik's Cube World Championships. Luckily, nowhere near Britain. It's in Budapest. So, Paul.
Yeah.
Was it a good decade, or did we just look back with rose-tinted glasses and see how we remember the good things and forget the bad?
It was a great decade. I mean, nothing lasts
I bet it was
forever.
good for you.
So, well, it was. Yeah, it was. No, it was worse for me, because when the Thatcher crash came, everything I'd got that was worth something was worth nothing. So it was terrible. But, you know, most things go sour in the end. But if you remember the beginning of it, it was great, you know. And I love the flamboyance of it all. It was the closest thing we had, if we were lucky enough to live through it, to the 60s,
Yes.
I think, where we felt like we could achieve everything.
Quite British, really, isn't it? That you think about blokes dressing up as girls, all that music, all that... I mean, it's art is really what we're talking about, wasn't it? It's a new birth of pop art. And you don't seem to get that elsewhere, or not with that kind of lunacy that we have in Britain.
Yeah, but the British always do things with a certain amount of lunacy. That's why you always get the British eccentric, you know.
Yeah, and we've got
Only
one...
the 80s was full of them.
We've got one sitting at the end of the table, haven't we, Dylan? Because we have a photo of you from the 80s.
Yes!
Which I have to say...
It's great.
You clearly, you know, you set yourself up. We can see how you ended up as editor of GQ, a style Bible. From there, so what's the story there, Dylan?
What was that for?
That was for ID magazine. That was I just joined the magazine, and I was helping with a fashion shoot, and they asked me to, you know, step in.
Was it a good
I was a big model, big hand model in the 80s. But the 80s was very good to me. I love the 80s. It gave me a career. Although, considering the climate, it was very much a sort of fiddling while Rome burned ethos. But a lot of great things came out of the 80s, but they came out of social disruption, out of adversity. But there was an incredible sense of sort of DIY culture.
Yeah.
And it was, you know, all of these fantastic entrepreneurs came out of the 80s in the music industry, in club culture,
and lots
videos,
of unemployed
publishing.
people as well. We've got to remember, for all the entrepreneurs, we hit well over 3 million unemployed.
You know, like Norman Tebbit said, we were all forced to get up on our bikes
Mine
and
would have
go
been
and
nicked
look
the
for
night
work.
before, unfortunately.
You're such a card-carrying socialist, aren't you?
Yeah. Actually, I refuse to be a member of any party. I really do. What about you? You were probably, what, about 2 when the 80s happened, were you, man?
No, I'm actually older than you think.
We do have a photo, actually, as we said, styled by Simon Cowell.
Look at that hair! My jeans are literally under my armpits. What was I thinking?
What have you got at the end of your hair?
Yes.
It was my dog.
Okay.
All right, okay.
Yes, that was my dog.
So,
But
good
look at
decade
the
for
hair. It was. It was the decade that I grew up. In 1985, I was 13, so it was when I sort of discovered boys and fashion and hair and, yeah, apart from the perm.
Because it was, I mean, you say fashion, I mean, you could do anything. You could go mad in the 80s.
Well, I remember saying to my mum, "Oh, I wish I was born in the 60s because you had proper fashion. We haven't got fashion in the 80s." And now I look back on them, and said to me in that, I think I said that whilst wearing a bright yellow rah-rah skirt. So, yeah, I think the fashion in the 80s was
It was meant to be the designer decade, but actually you're right. If you look, and the 70s was always the decade that taste forgot.
Yes.
But if you actually look back now, I mean, people look fairly ridiculous with the padded shoulders and the double-breasted suits and
Yeah.
everything else. But then I think that always happens.
I looked sensible all the way through
You know,
the
the great
80s.
thing about the